the last line of defense before the Earth falls into Maku space. There, the space sheriff Gavans. Earth is open to intergalactic coexistence, but when there are bad actors, the Galactic Federation Police is on it. On Earth Alpha 003, there is Reiji Doki, who's a space sheriff. Along him is a support team, Date and Agi. An alarm goes off, and luckily, Agi explains to us that this is a multiversal story. The Galactic Federation Police also try to stop emergence from running rampant, or else it can destroy their layer of the multiverse. They get called to Multi-Earth Lambda 8018. Here we meet Setsuna Aiko-kun, part of this universe's Galactic Federation Police. A young man is out causing havoc, unleashing a monster called an emergence, and so Reiji transforms.
GAVAN INFINITY.
Once the emergence is defeated, Setsuna steps in to fight Reiji. Episode 2. Setsuna explains that the title of Gavan is given to only one person in the universe. Then, an Emo-gear creates an opening to Maku space, but it's easily disposed, as the Galactic Police de-pink the planet. Setsuna attempts to arrest Reiji, but Reiji says no and goes to investigate on his own. A supplier of the Emo-gears appears to stop Setsuna. Reiji arrives in time to rescue Setsuna when we see that Setsuna is actually an android. He was created to listen to orders without emotion, and was given the title of Gavan Bushido. However, it doesn't matter to Reiji where Setsuna comes from. Reiji transforms to defend the entire multiverse. Setsuna hears this, and remembers someone saying that he needs to live for himself. So Setsuna transforms. They fight for a bit, until Maku's space is summoned. Reiji and Setsuna follow. Reiji calls for the Galactic Federation Police to authorize a transformation for his robo. Crazy cool action later, and a Maku space base is destroyed and the supplier is arrested. Setsuna doesn't wish to part ways. In fact, he says he'd cry if he were human, but Reiji isn't crying because he knows they'll meet again. Episode 3. On Earth Iota 5109, we meet Kiki and Koto, two investigators with the Galactic Federation Police. Back with Reiji, he tells Director Karel that an interdimensional traveler might be among them. Karel thinks that this enemy might be involved with the death of an old detective named Gato. Meanwhile with Setsuna, he tries to interrogate the dealer from the last episode, along with Commander Amo. Reiji continues his investigation in another Earth and talks to Kiki and Koto. Emo-gear harness Emergi, the embodiment of human emotion. The trio then investigate an Emo-gear case together. Some really cool fighting in a mech fight later, a monster appears on the ground, which leads to Kiki transforming into Gavan Luminous. Then the day is saved. Episode 4. On another Earth, vital facilities have been disappearing. Reiji investigates and is introduced to Shoko and an ant named Arimoto. This is kinda cute because Ari means ant in Japanese. On this Earth, bugs coexist with humans. Man, I'd be really freaked out. The three unfortunately find an AI data center that was swallowed into the ground. Getting deeper into the facility, the team come across illegal arms dealers who use bad Emo-gears to become Imons. Reiji transforms, as well as the Ant? Arimoto is Gavan Amais. Then the day is saved.
Episode 5.
On Earth Lambda 8018, Gavan Bushido stops a back alley Emo-gear deal. The leader of the deal recognizes Setsuna's commander as Full Metal Ammo. Reiji is called on to help as Commissioner Amo was kidnapped. She's known as Full Metal Ammo because she takes down evil organizations like a bullet for the wicked. Dude, that sounds kinda cool. The two Gavans go their separate ways when Setsuna is able to decode a location where the commissioner is being held. With Reiji's help, Setsuna rescues her and discusses his own way of Gavan. There's a little more detail than that, but basically, Setsuna is able to go past his directives by following his own path. Opening up like this has Reiji say that if Setsuna didn't have emotions, then he wouldn't be able to fight. Episode 6. On Earth Iota 5109, Kiki and Koto escort a young lady who's trying to get back to her home planet. Reiji helps out by stopping a phantom thief who's after the lady's treasure. I know this part was only like 2 sentences long, but I have a soft spot for Phantom Thief stories, and this was a really fun one, especially with the ending. Episode 7. While on a case, a figure appears, one Reiji calls Gavan Destiny. The Black Gavan wants Reiji to send a message that he is returned, something the Galaxy Federation police will understand. Reiji chases after the Black Gavan and remembers back to when he and an old detective named Gato were talking about how Gavan turned traitor. Gato explains that Gavans are meant to shine like the sun, illuminating with love. Then Gato suggests Reiji becomes a Gavan. Eventually, Gato is killed, and Reiji's Emogear is driven by anger. Reiji finds the Black Gavan, who calls himself Death Gavan. When Reiji was young, he looked up to Gavan Destiny, so seeing him turn traitorous angered Reiji. During their mecha battle, Death Gavan mentions a universal truth, something Reiji will never understand. Death Gavan unleashes negative energy across the galaxy, big enough for the other Gavans to notice. Episode 8. We begin with a flashback from Setsuna, who was in a war on a planet long ago. Reiji, on the path to continue fighting Death Gavan, is stopped by Commissioner Amo, who says this new case is under Setsuna's jurisdiction. Setsuna and Agi search for a shooter who's using an Emogear. The shooter activates his Emogear against Setsuna, forcing Setsuna to fight Reiji. It almost appears that Setsuna has come to his senses, until... Then the shooter steps out, as his bullet was nullified by Reiji's own Emogear. Then the day is saved. Episode 9. Investigator Gato's Emogear is found, but more importantly, Kiki and Koto are having an argument, so Reiji is called, when coincidentally, the Phantom Thief returns. However, an Emons appears that's able to multiply every time it's hurt. Kiki and Koto continue to bicker, causing an Emogear to create a void into Maku's space. The day is soon saved by the power of friendship, and we learn how Kiki and Koto became friends in school. 10. Kiki and Koto see a reading from something they don't know, when they're introduced to another Gavan. On Earth Alpha 0073, Director Karel gives Reiji's team a new weapon, the Dolnado unit. We're then taken to Earth Zeta 2066 and are introduced to Raya, the purple Gavan from before. His side of the Galaxy Federation are also looking for Emogear. This takes us back to Earth Alpha 0073, as Raya infiltrates it for the Dolnado unit. Raya fights Reiji, but it seems to be a misunderstanding, as Raya sees Reiji to be an evil user of the Emogear. An Emogear calms Raya a bit, untransforming himself, but the two continue fighting. Then they transform again? Huh. The fight continues in space with their mechs. Then Reiji arrests Raya. Huh, that's a little anticlimactic. Episode 11. Raya gets interrogated when we learn his civilian name is Kazunami Kunai, and he quickly escapes. Kunai uses his opportunity to take Reiji to Earth 1, saying that it's Reiji's fate to do so. Curiously enough, Director Karel asks how Kunai is able to travel between dimensions. While of course interdimensional travel is possible, not everyone is able to naturally withstand the biological differences of other worlds. And a real quick side thing here, Kunai's Emogear is of fear, so Reiji keeps asking what Kunai is afraid of, but doesn't get a direct answer. Kunai's side of the police also use different designations for dimensions. His use Earth-numbers, while Reiji uses the Greek alphabet in combination with numbers. But aside from Earth 1, I'm sticking to the Galaxy Federation naming scheme for Reiji. Anyway, Reiji falls into a trap by a villain who kidnapped Kunai's sister, which is what Kunai is afraid of. Aw, Reiji is so cool. Kunai learns to accept his fear and rebels to save the day. His sister is also saved. But when the villain is kidnapped, she mentions that Kunai can't handle the universal truth, mirroring what Death Gavan said to Reiji. 12. On Earth Lambda 8018, Setsuna cuts onions because he wants to feel tears and the sadness that comes from them. Before entering a crying class, guess that's a thing in this universe, Setsuna bumps into Kunai. It turns out the crying class is being helped by someone with an Emogear, so the Gavan set off to save the day. 13. Kiki disappears, so Koto teams up with Kunai to find her. Kiki gets possessed by a ghost who is looking for a way to connect to her special someone. However, that someone doesn't remember the ghost, because time moved differently for both of them, and that someone passed on long ago. Kunai grows giant and the day is saved. Dang, I really like the Luminous episodes, and this one was just as sweet, but there's not really too much to add generally, at least for like an overall story. I just want to let you know that I absolutely love Kiki and Koto's chemistry, now with Kunai added to the main cast. 14. On Earth, Lambda 8018, Kunai and Setsuna fight against Death Gavan. His appearance alerts Reiji to join in the fight. However, our heroes are quickly defeated. Reiji realizes that the universal truth has to do with his own powers. Death Gavan reveals himself to be Mikage Teshin, formerly Gavan Destiny. Teshin confirms that Reiji's energy is so great that it's become a universal truth. Reiji wants to see why Teshin betrayed the Federation, so they transform to travel into Maku's space. Reiji's team follows closely behind, leading to a mecha battle. And it's a damn good one. Teshin knew Reiji's friends wouldn't leave him, so he wanted to fight and have Reiji's anger grow. Then the auxiliary vehicles arrive to help in the battle, and to remind you to buy them in stores. Teshin teleports to Earth Iota 5109. Near where Kiki and Koto are, Reiji wants to arrest Teshin, but Kunai wants to neutralize the threat. Their hesitation allows Teshin to escape using the powers he's called upon from something named Azazolth. 15. The Federation celebrate Patron succeeding into becoming a Gavan. Oh, oh my gosh. Okay, I haven't mentioned Wanibuchi and Patron at all so far. Well, they're the comic relief, and they have shown up in basically every episode. I just haven't mentioned them yet for story purposes. This is the Wani Pat episode, as they investigate a bombing case to prove Patron's worthiness of becoming a Gavan. It's pretty good. 16. Team Infinity are called to visit the Interplanetary Railway on Earth 55791. In this dimension, Earth has become a frozen wasteland, so humans digitize themselves and build railways for their amusement. Reiji was called to stop a runaway train, the Express Gavarian. The team do so by uploading the passengers onto the Cosmo Gavarian and defeating the Emons inside the other. However, the bad Gear is still running amok. To stop the train, the conductor virtually transforms into Gavan Diagram. Agi also gets some great focus here, as she teaches the trained supercomputer that emotions are what make humans so special. It's a real vibe. As a thank you for the help, the conductor gives the Express Gavarian to Reiji. 17. On Earth Iota 5109, Kiki and Koto interrogate the Phantom Thief, as we get more pieces on how the Phantom Thief was arrested, which also led to a fight with an Emon. Plus we get to see Reiji use the Express Gavarian in this really cool combo form. After the arrest, the Phantom Thief says an Gear user accidentally bought something online the size of an asteroid, so they were trying to stop it. Okay, that's incredible. I love Tokusatsu. To stop the asteroid, the Cosmo Gavarian combines with the Express Gavarian, which allows Kiki to accept the item and return to sender. Hey, that's better customer service than Amazon. 18. On Earth Lambda 8018, Setsuna does laundry, and remembers seeing a woman in white. Reiji is called to help Setsuna infiltrate a mixer party where the host is suspected to have an Gear, and they were right. Except, there are 2 bad Gears. Then the day is saved. Afterwards, Setsuna recounts how he was rescued by a woman in white, who taught him to keep living. That woman was his beloved. 19. On Earth Iota 5109, there's a hostage situation, where the suspect specifically asked to talk to Gavan Luminous. The hostage will be let go if Kiki can solve a little puzzle, and Kiki solves it before the explanation is over. However, this was also planned by an officer to get Kiki out of commission. Meanwhile, Reiji is lured in to fight Death Gavan. We get flashbacks to Kiki and Koto at the academy, learning that Koto actually did want to become a Gavan, but of course Kiki was ultimately chosen. Koto tries to transform, but isn't authorized. And then, the director explains that only one Gavan can exist in the universe, so Koto transforming would mean giving up her memories of Kiki due to the overwhelming emotions. Koto agrees to it, if only to rescue Kiki. Back with Reiji, Kunai joins him and uses the Cosmo Gavarian as the gun for the mech in combination with the train. And if that isn't one of the coolest things I've ever seen, especially in Tokusatsu, oh my gosh. Then the day is saved and Kiki is hospitalized. Although, she wakes up and greets Koto as if they just met. Kiki. 20. Still on Earth Iota 5109, Koto continues her duty as Gavan Luminous. Meanwhile, Reiji and the Galactic Federation Police investigate more into Azazolth. Then we're introduced to Superintendent Wolhan. And yeah, that's it for him. Guess I just wanted to name drop him. We catch up with Reiji and the Phantom Thief, learning about Kiki losing her memories. Reiji promises that Kiki will return, which causes his inner energy of the Universal Truth to teleport him to Death Gavan, along with a couple of previous villains, and Azazolth. It's a bit abstract as to what really happens here, but Reiji wakes up from his battle, and uses his energy to return Kiki's memories. 21. The Rogues Gallery in Maku Space gather, targeting Earth Alpha 0073. Reiji starts to get overwhelmed by the Emons, so Gavan's Luminous, Vraya, and Bushido arrive to help. Azazolth's influence grows, as more Gavans fight to protect their universes. Kunai's side of the organization was able to develop interdimensional travel, which is how these Gavans arrived. Then the fight is taken to space, recreating the opening scene from episode 1, and the day is saved, until the stinger shows us that the higher-ups of the Federation are planning to discontinue the Gavans. 22. On Earth Zeta 2066, Wanipat interrogates Superintendent Wolhan's right-hand man, who was working for Azazolth. Meanwhile, Reiji and his allies work on arresting the escaped villains from past episodes. However, every Gavan's trigger stops working. Reiji is pulled into a white void, and is told that the Supreme Command has stopped the Gavan systems, and that having multiple Gavans in one dimension interfered with the higher laws. Reiji is told that he must step down, because he's at risk of becoming another Death Gavan. Director Karel steps in to say Reiji is a good man, and the Gavan should be trusted. Reiji understands the Federation is upset about Death Gavan's betrayal, but he himself is willing to carry that emotional burden to stop Teshin. The order is lifted, and the Gavans transform. Episode 23, Infinity. Reiji goes to face Teshin in their final battle, as the other Gavans make their arrests. Reiji and Teshin continue their fight, when Reiji is shown the day he met Investigator Gato. Reiji was young and lashed out at the world, but grew with Gato, until Gato was killed and berated Reiji during his final moments. Teshin shot Gato as a rite of passage down the dark path he's taken, reliving these memories in Reiji's Reiji. But through the lessons he's learned from his friends, Reiji keeps his emotions in check and turns his energy into positive emotions. Reiji uses his energy to cross dimensions, allowing each of his friends to take shots at Teshin. They even jump into a 2D dimension. A two-dimensional dimension. It's awesome. Reiji wants to live on for himself, not a higher being or Azazolth. So with those emotions, Reiji powers up further with his laser sword and defeats Teshin. Back with the Federation, Wanipat suspects Superintendent Wolhan to be working for Azazolth, so they're given a mission to keep an eye on him. The Death Gavan case has gone cold. Setsuna, Kiki, and Kunai feel like something is wrong. Reiji has gone missing. Gavansatsu here with his adorable mascot Doro. And of course, this is like my closet Reiji cosplay. I mean, it's just workout gloves, a white shirt, and a red jacket, but easy cosplay, and it doesn't look too bad, unlike this thing. Okay, so I have a feeling I'll be saying this a lot in the next few years. Project Red was fighting an uphill battle from the moment it was announced. With that, I'm gonna say this in the most subjective way I can. The first show for Project Red was always going to be seen with some animosity, since some will see it as a reason for Sentai going on hiatus. This is obviously not true, but I have seen countless people online repeat the sentiment of, I'm not watching GAVAN Infinity or Project Red because it replaced Sentai. Something to that effect. And yeah, I get it. I'm not happy either seeing Sentai was almost abruptly put on hiatus, especially with a 50-year anniversary celebration that didn't feel like a celebration. That just adds to how unfairly GAVAN Infinity is currently being looked at. However, there is plenty to criticize the show for. Let's start with what you'll see first. The visuals. Okay, Vaseline on the lens aside, the show is so jarring to look at. I personally find the GAVAN Infinity suit, and to an extent every GAVAN suit except GAVAN Amigo, to be absolutely gorgeous. These suits do not look cheap, except for Gavan Amigo. There were a couple times I saw a stunt suit being used, and even that looked pretty good, if not a tiny bit noticeable. But then these suits are juxtaposed on the same screen by CGI that looks worse than usual. And I really mean more than usual, because GAVAN Infinity has moments where the CGI is actually great, for tokusatsu standards of course, but great. Then we get some odd editing decisions, visible production crew in the helmet, Gavan Amigo. Like, visually, GAVAN Infinity has some incredible shots, some amazing designs, along with some awful visual production that I can't wrap my head around. Mostly because everything else feels cheaper than usual. Something seems missing, huh? Notice how I haven't talked about the action? For once in Toei Tokusatsu, I didn't care too much for the fight scenes. Again, there are some incredible fights and I did pick them out, but for the most part, it was alright. That's really weird for me to say, considering GAVAN Infinity's production crew are veterans in Toei. Hirofumi Fukuzawa, the action director, worked on some shows that had incredible fights. Go Busters, Kyoryuger, Lupad, as much as I didn't like that show, it had some amazing fights. Kira Major, Go Juger? He was also a main director for GAVAN Infinity, so I keep wondering what happened here. Well, the producer Yoshito Kuji and writer Atsuhiro Tamioka don't have too much tokusatsu experience, or at least credits, to show what they can do, and of course they're not to blame for so many moving parts. This is all something I've actually been meaning to talk about for a long time. The following segment might seem a bit heavy-handed, but bear with me. So, the original Gavan from 1982 is named Gavan. His title is Space Sheriff, so he's Space Sheriff Gavan. And only upon deciding to stay on Earth does he take on a more common name, Retsu Ichijoji, but he's still sometimes referred to as his given name, Gavan. Years later, the next generation of Space Sheriff arrives with a man named Geki Jumonji, who becomes Gavan Type G? Geki's first and last name aren't Gavan, so this is kinda odd. At the very least, the suit is the same as before with some minor changes, but still very clearly Gavan, so he can get a reluctant pass here. Now with GAVAN Infinity, we have Reiji Doki. Why is he called Gavan? The suit is barely like the original. His family name isn't Gavan. One time someone in my chat said that names do become titles in real life. I wasn't given an example, but sure, let's go with that. Let's say Gavan did become a title in this universe. Space Sheriff Sharavan and Scheider get to keep their names instead of being Gavan Sharavan and Gavan Scheider. Anyway, the original could be in the same canon timeline with Reiji, and so Gavan is a title given to certain space sheriffs. Makes sense so far. Then why are all the multiversal Gavans calling themselves Gavan? Okay, the Galactic Federation Police probably has to have a uniform across the board. Fine. Then why are they using Gavan as a title when Space Sheriff is already right there? And they do call themselves Space Sheriffs. What's the Gavan part for? That's a first name. Yes, this is a very silly thing to think about, and it ultimately doesn't matter as I'm gonna play Sonic Racing Crossworlds after this and forget what I just talked about. However, these are just smaller signs of a collective experience. Gavan is a title now because, and again, bear with me, because I think the general audience is more receptive to hearing Gavan than Metal Hero, and obviously, more than Project Red. And what little people know of Gavan is that he's a silver hero with a mechanical dragon and sometimes fights in a weird space area. So we have GAVAN Infinity, a red hero with a gimmick line and sometimes fights in a weird space area. The idea of the modern henshin hero feels like it's ticking boxes rather than trying anything new, which becomes a major issue in itself, but I get it. GAVAN Infinity is too safe. And it needed to be. Now, all of this is just vibes based, I guess. But to me, there's just something missing from it all. So to fill in everything else, and why I even cared to keep watching, was because I cared about the characters and the individual stories. GAVAN Infinity is mainly episodic, which I think is a very smart idea. keeping stories smaller while only having a loose overarching story about the multiverse. From the very beginning, the main story is Reiji doing his job as GAVAN Infinity, traveling the multiverse to stop Emogear from being used in villainous ways. That's the basic groundwork, and each of our main Gavans have their own story to follow. The quote-unquote main story is not about Reiji versus Death Gavan. That's just one part of a whole. Kunai's story is probably the most generic since he's traveling not only for the Emogear, but also for interdimensional research. His personal plot about finding his sister is resolved really fast, and it works as setup for his character. We're not told directly about Sessuna's backstory, and a lot of it is up for you to put the pieces together. Though admittedly, it's not a very complex plot, but his feelings are, and that's what makes him interesting in a story focusing on people handling their emotions. Kiki and Koto are basically glued together, with a Phantom Thief plot sprinkled in to again help push the characters a little further into figuring out how to not only stop the villains, but to do the right things, whether together or when left alone. And Reiji, the universal warrior who has a mix of everything, traveling dimensions, figuring out his emotions, and learning how to do the right thing, even when faced with vengeance. Colloquially, a serialized story could be enjoyed more by a modern audience who wants to see how things play out, heroes versus villains, but those serializations would be filled with holes if the characters weren't good. I've seen stories that are generally pretty great, but have characters that aren't exactly the best, so mixing these two elements could make a good story feel flat. An episodic show doesn't need a complex story, or really much of a story at all, when the characters are more interesting than figuring out a villain's plan of the week and how that connects to some overarching story that wasn't thought out in the first place. An episodic formula's greatest strength is how it portrays characters in everyday situations, and GAVAN Infinity has that down perfectly. I love these characters so much. I honestly didn't mind if some of them didn't show up at all, because I know their individual episodes would be worth the wait. But it's not only the main cast, as the supporting characters are also a ton of fun. I didn't talk about Wanipat much, or brought up Kunai's sister past her debut episode, or mentioned the other Galaxy Federation police, but they're all pretty good too. Even minor characters make this world feel lived in, and that's exactly what I wanted. The emotional stakes are all there, with episodes dedicated to showing why these characters are worth watching for. I understand that viewers are upset about Sentai going on hiatus, but I don't think that's any reason to criticize GAVAN Infinity for being something it's not. GAVAN Infinity is GAVAN Infinity, and its love for its characters show that it's the strongest. With all that being said, join me next time as we hunt for treasure in Kakusei Hunter Omega Horn. Now if you excuse me and Puff have a multiverse to go visit.